night they won the cup, it also happened to be my 40th birthday, and my wife at the time planned a 40th birthday party, not looking at the schedule, and basically went to my boss and pleaded, please, you cannot send him to Buffalo. You cannot send him there, because I got this thing all planned and paid for and all that, and I didn't go. And so at 12:30, when the Stars finally won, you know, I was back in the studio in Arlington at the time, and our post-game show that night began at 2 a.m., and I just went on and said, fellas, I am here as long as you want to talk, and when the call stopped, that's when we're going home. And we made it till 5 a.m. and went home after that. It was one of the, it could not have been a better 40th birthday, other than just being there and having Ed Belfour put champagne on me or something like that. Okay, so yes, I've been here since 1984. How did I get here? I went to the University of Florida. I was in a very unique situation in Florida because it's one of the few places in the country where the radio operation is fully commercial. Most college radio stations are, you know, NPR, whatever, not non-commercial and whatnot. But we had a full-time operations, full-time general manager, 4 salespeople, news director, music director, the whole bit. But the kids did pretty much everything. Now, I mean, it was an amazing lab because if you wanted to learn how to sell radio, you could do it. If you wanted to learn, you know, how to be on the air, whatever, you could do it. It was an amazing place to be, and I felt incredibly fortunate to be there. I also did some television there. There's a PBS television affiliate. They did a nightly news show, you know, which on the college level always leads to some shits and giggles. You know, it's but I quickly really found out that I enjoyed radio a lot more. It really appealed to my sense of impatience more than anything else. When you realize when you're watching a 3-minute sportscast and say you see a report that runs 90 seconds and how long it takes to put that 90 seconds together, that just really didn't appeal to me very much. I got a chance to do games when I was there. I did Florida baseball. I always believed I was going to be a baseball guy growing up. I love baseball. Actually, it was a Mookie Wilson ground ball, not Bill Buckner having to go through his legs. I was a huge Met fan growing up, huge Tom Seaver fan. You know, my friends always said to me, you're going to be the voice of Met baseball or Jet football or something like that. But I love baseball, and so I did baseball in Florida. I also did women's basketball, and you know, I would love to have done the men's, but you know, obviously at that time, you know, and still, you know, you got the guy, whatever. There was one night when the guy got sick, and I was almost ready to do the game. They wanted me to do it. A lot of people wanted me to do it, but the general manager of the radio station said, "No, you're not doing it. I'm doing it." And he was clueless. He didn't know what he was doing, but you know, he was an adult. He was 50, so he was gonna do it, take his chance, and go from there. But anyway, so you know, I basically spent 2 years in that program, and it was terrific. But I didn't have a job coming out of college, and ultimately I moved back home to New York, and I was about 6 months into looking, and I found a place called Sports Phone. Now, Sports Phone is, this is before the internet now, understand, this is 1984, the internet isn't, Al Gore's not invented the internet yet. This is the way that people got scores and news quickly. Called 976-1313, and it basically would cost you a dime. Now, this was the way, again, that gamblers pretty much got their scores. And the gamblers would be very upset when you were putting out 26 scores in 58 seconds and going really fast, and they may have missed your score, or, you know, especially on a busy college football Saturday or college basketball Saturday, that there was a supplemental line that we would move, say, the day games over to, so that the most recent scores could be on, and you know, they would just get all bent out of shape when they didn't hear they didn't hear the score, and you know, and that I always tell the story that so one night we're done, we go out and get a drink after work, and we're sitting in this bar, and you know, bartenders all over my butt. And I said, man, you're just going too fast, can't pick it all up. Got called 3 times, costing too much money. And so there's a woman sitting at the bar, and the woman's listening to this, and she then proceeds to pipe up at some point and says, you're Chuck Cooperstein? I said, yeah. Says, you realize you're responsible for 85% of all divorces in America? but thanks very much for letting me know, and on we went. So anyway, so I was there, but the great thing about Sports Phone was that you were doing everything that you were doing in radio, except that the message was going through the phone company as opposed to going out over the air. We covered games, all the local teams, and in New York, there's 2 and 3 of everything. So there was plenty of opportunity. Ultimately, once I got started in the fall of '82, probably took a little while to get myself established, but I spent a lot of time with the Jets, primarily because their training facility was about 5 minutes from my house, so it was easy for me to get there. I did a lot of work with the Devils and the Nets. Occasionally did some Knicks and Rangers too, but more senior guys had that taken care of, so they went to the majority of the games. And it was in that day, the Knicks, our seat for the Knicks was sitting right next to the Knicks bench. It's not like today where the media is pretty much sent as far away as possible. But we were right next to the Knicks bench when Hubie Brown was coaching the team, and it was just an absolute treasure to be a part of that every night, because he's the greatest. He's still the greatest. So I was there and just did a lot of covering and a lot of just learning how to go into locker rooms and deal with people. Sometimes you get yelled at, sometimes you don't. You haven't lived until it happens. But in the summer of 1984, the U.S. Open Golf Championship was at Wingfoot in Westchester County. So that was the year that the Fuzzy Zeller and Greg Norman played off. And I happened, a guy who I worked with at Sports Phone had moved to St. Louis and was working at KMOX in St. Louis, which at that time was undoubtedly the best sports station in America. I mean, they had all the major play-by-play, and they were just really committed to sports on all levels. Well, he moved out there, and right before the tournament, he calls me and says, can you help us? Can you do some stringing, send us some tape and whatever from the tournament? Well, sure, why not? Absolutely. I mean, I'm there, so. And then, they asked, so midway, so I'm ready to do this. And then midway through the tournament, Hale Irwin's leading the tournament. Well, Hale Irwin is from suburban St. Louis. He's a St. Louis guy. And they asked me, and said, can you get Hale Irwin one-on-one for 3 or 4 minutes? Send it back. And I'll try. Now, understand that today, the likelihood of something like that happening is really pretty limited. The explosion of media has just changed a lot of things, and frankly, not for the better. I mean, it's great that we all have jobs, but at the same time, a lot of times, because we all have jobs, it causes off access in many ways. But anyway, so I was able to get. I went up to him and said, "Hale, I'm working for KMOX this weekend." And said, "Can you give me 3 minutes?" And he was all over it. Fine, did it, great, sent it back. They were thrilled, and the whole weekend everything's going great. And so when that was over, and then about a week later, unbeknownst to me, Brad Sham, voiced the Cowboys, but also at that time sports director of KRLD, was looking for someone to hire so they could start doing sportscasts at night. They basically had stopped after Sports Central's talk show ended at 7:30. But they wanted to keep going through the night while they were still doing news, and they needed somebody who was able to cover games and get sound and just do sportscasts from wherever, being on remote. Hey, great. But I didn't know about this at the time. But he called KMOX in St. Louis, and he asked the producer, who's the guy that my friend was working for, apparently about somebody else that he was thinking about hiring. And the guy said, "No, you don't want to hire that guy. You want to hire this guy Cooperstein in New York. He knows what he's doing." And this is, again, how Brad recounts the story to me, all these years later. Well, so Brad calls me and says, "Hey, you come very highly recommended from Rob Silverstein in St. Louis. How'd you like to work in Dallas?" Well, it took about less than a second to say yes. I was not afraid. And they said, "Well, send your tape and resume." Well, I'd sent my tape and resume out about 500 times, and that hadn't necessarily panned out the way I'd hoped it would pan out, but 4 weeks later it did. He called me and said, "When can you start?" And so, I got myself down there, and look, I'd never been to Dallas, but it was a big city, and I figured, hey, I'm 25 years old, I think I'm a pretty good guy. My friends said, "God, you don't know anybody down there." I said, "Well, figured I'll meet some people down there. It'll work out. I mean, there are a lot of people to choose from, which is, you know, also one of the reasons why I chose going to Florida. I'd gone to a very small private high school, and my graduating class was 75, and I was not going to go to a typical Northeastern liberal arts school that had 4,000 people. I figured you have 4,000, you have 40,000. You'll find your friends wherever you go, and you might as well have more of a choice. So that was a huge part of the decision I made to go there. And again, knowing that the program in Florida is probably as underrated as any in the country. So anyway, so I got down here, and I started, and I covered games, and also because I had done the work in New York, a lot of the national radio networks, knew that I was capable of getting them the stuff that they needed, and they at the time were having a real problem in Dallas getting people to cover games and send them tape and do updates and all that stuff. And I figured, hey, as Larry said, hey, I wasn't getting paid very much, and I needed beer money, and this was a really good way to get beer money. And so I did. I mean, so whether it was CBS, the Associated Press, United Press International, RKO, all the NBC, all these national networks, ABC. Basically I was the guy in Dallas, and usually who got fed first basically came down to who paid me first, and I had my pecking order of what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. If people didn't like it, well, they didn't like it. That's the way it went. But so I did that, and was doing that for a while, and then. They probably did it for a couple of years, and then in the process, I started in when I first got there. Actually, in the fall of 1984, I started. I got a chance to work with the old Southwest Conference Radio Network in the studios, and so I did a couple of updates, and they liked me, and that led to the following year when KRLD got the rights to TCU. That it was a very weird setup where the play-by-play guy came from the home team, the visiting team did the color. Well, Brad was doing the play-by-play at that time, so he would do the games. We did the non-conference games together, and then I did the color on the road games, which was great. I mean, it's my whole goal, and I think Larry, to sort of paraphrase what Larry said a little bit ago, you got to find something you love. Okay, my whole goal when I was growing up, when I was getting into business, when I was, that sports phone, was how was I going to the game? How was I getting to the game? I did not want to sit in a studio, necessarily for 4 hours. But was I going to be a play-by-play guy? Was I going to be a writer? Was I going to be a radio reporter? Was I going to work in PR? What was I going to do? But that was my overarching thing. How was I getting to the game? And so the fact that I was able to do this at a relatively young age was really quite helpful. So I got that, and then Brad didn't want to do basketball, so I started doing basketball. I did the basketball that first year in '86 when they tied the Southwest Conference Championship and didn't make the tournament. But I mean, it was everything that I hoped it would be, and I knew I always thought I was pretty good at it, and that kind of confirmed to me that I was pretty good at it. So I was there a while, and I'm not going to bore you with the whole story, but just basically, I was there 8 years at KRLD, did a lot of different play-by-play, ultimately did morning drive, did talk shows, did the Cowboys pregame and postgame shows, which is always a challenge, especially in that period when they weren't any good, but it's always more fun when they lose than when they win, because when people are upset, it's far better radio. Even though apparently the ratings that say that they're always better when they win, and people buy more newspapers when they win than when they lose. So, but I really enjoyed that. But I got fired in 1992 at KRLD. You will get fired, okay? You will get fired. You haven't lived in our business until you've been fired. As it turns out, I've been fired twice, and it was never because of performance. It was because of just a difference in philosophy. I had a strict sense of belief of what I believe that I did or should do and how to do it to bring out the best in me. And people above me disagree with me, and they made the decision to cut me. And you're going to probably run into that at some point in your life. Now, whether it's because of that or because businesses are changing and they've decide they're looking at a different model. It's going to happen, but it's how you deal with it that really matters the most. You know, if you're truly committed to being in the business, you will find a way to stay in the business. And whether it means, you know, dropping down in order to build yourself back up, or maybe you find something that's even better than what you had. If you're committed to it, you will find something. But it is a relationship business. You know, my first job at KRLD was because of somebody else who I didn't, well, a guy who recommended me for a job, but basically another guy at that station who I didn't even know, you know, recommending me for a job. And I had never met Brad. Never met him. In fact, never even came down to Dallas to interview. You know, we never even really interviewed. I mean, I just sent him my tape and resume. And 4 weeks later, I got hired. It's, I mean, it generally doesn't work that way, and I understand that. But ultimately, you know, for you guys, yes, communication is absolutely essential, because the way the world is right now, whether it's by speaking or by writing, you've got to be able to communicate. You've got to be able to do it succinctly. So, I mean, it's absolutely essential to be able to write and to be able to speak and to be able to do it well. You know, I was a broadcast major at Florida. I didn't want to be a broadcast major, but the only way that I could work at the radio and television stations was to be in the College of Journalism and Communications. I really wanted to be a political science and history major. It didn't mean, you know, probably wasn't going to get a job based off of that, but it's the stuff that I really like and still like. And I really wanted that with broadcast minor, but so it wound up kind of being flipped. I believe you need to know a lot about as much as you possibly can. You know, a liberal arts education is really, I mean, you need to know some science stuff. Listen, I hated biology, okay? You know, but you know, you need to know what an ACL is. You need to know what an MCL is. You need to know what a navicular bone is and all this. You need to know this stuff. You know, you need to know business. You know, my dad always wished that I was a business major. Well, he probably was right. I probably should have been a business major, since sports is all about money and how money works, and how you understand salary cap in a salary cap world. You need to know about that. You need to understand how the money works and why it works the way it does. You know, you don't need huge math skills. I'm living embodiment of that. Okay, but you know, you do. I mean, I guess I've done my stuff long enough that I can pretty much do, you know, most simple fractions in my head. You know, I can tell you that you know, if you shoot you know, 11 and 15, you know, that's about 68%. So that's you know, I can do stuff like that, even with non-common numbers. So, but you do need to know that kind of stuff. And it is going to be how you interact with people that ultimately will give you the opportunity to get your job. But it's your own hard work and drive that will allow you to keep your job and ultimately be able to advance and move on to wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do. And he's absolutely right, because you know, there's so many things that you can do. I mean, I feel incredibly fortunate. I'm one of 30 people in the world who do what I do. You know, there aren't that many.